Hello, everyone, and welcome to Illuminated Movement Astrology. I'm Nikki, your astrologer, here to talk today about the upcoming lunar eclipse happening on September the 17th or the 18th, depending on where you live in the world. So, eclipse season, it's back. Eclipses are interesting because they're such a wild card, right? We don't really totally know what's going to happen during an eclipse. And so that can bring a little bit of an unease, right? Especially since historically there are certain places in the world where eclipses were signs of bad omens. Whatever it is that you choose to believe, I believe that astrology is always an invitation of energy for us to work with, whether we choose to work with it, work against it, however that works out for you. So, this particular full moon is a super moon, meaning it's closer to the Earth. And that also means we're most likely going to be feeling its effects a little bit more. It's adding some extra punch to what is already quite a wild eclipse. And we'll talk about why it's such a wild eclipse. I'm going to show you the chart and break it down, give you some things to consider so that you can more easily integrate this energy into your own life. So let's take a look at the chart. All right, so we have a look at the chart here. So the full moon happening in Pisces, right? So we've got the moon opposite the sun. That's what makes it a full moon here, is when they're on opposite sides of the sky. But what's special about this eclipse is the nodes. Okay, the nodes are not in the same sign, right? Here's the north node over in Aries. And we've got the south node over here in Libra. And the nodes have been in Aries and Libra since about mid-2023. So they're getting to the end of the cycle. They're actually going to go to Pisces and Virgo next, because for those of you who don't know, the nodes move, in a sense, backwards through the zodiac. Okay, so from Aries, they go to Pisces, then Aquarius, and so on. So we have, in a sense, this preview of what's going to be coming up in 2025 when the nodes move fully into Pisces and Virgo. Okay, so we have that going on. The other thing we have going on here is the lunar eclipse itself. So there is a difference between a lunar eclipse and a solar eclipse. The biggest one is that the lunar eclipse is the sun and moon opposite one another, where the solar, of course, would be the sun and the moon together, for those of you that are still learning astrology. So when we talk about the energy of this kind of eclipse, if we're talking about a solar eclipse, we're talking about more of like a fresh energy, a beginning energy, an opening kind of energy. It has the feeling of being more yang, more masculine, more of an exhale. So when we talk about masculine and feminine, we're not necessarily meaning men or women, but we're meaning the energies behind them. So we're talking about more of like that exhale kind of energy if we think about breathing. Whereas the lunar energy is more inwardly directed. It's more yin. It's the inhale. So because of that, this eclipse is going to have more of an inwardly focused feeling and inwardly focused motivations. Okay, much more so than outward, as it were. So we have, in a sense, this standing on the threshold yet again, which I feel like is the theme for 2024, right? It's the hurry up and wait. Are we there yet? No, there's still stuff that we've got to go back and clean up, right? So we have this energy of future orientation, but also needing to close some things out. So we have a little bit of a paradox going on here in this particular chart. And so here we are. We've got this focus on internal changes, right? This lunar eclipse highlighting our inner world, our inner motivations, right? Our memories, because it's the moon. We're talking about the moon. We're talking about memories. We're talking about our capacity to nurture ourselves emotionally. What do we need on that kind of front? The sun and the moon themselves, they're in earth and water signs. So we've got Virgo over here with the sun. It's an earth sign, right? We have Pisces moon over here. It's a water sign. So again, that yin kind of energy, that inhale kind of energy, that drawing inward, right? Really, really highlighted here. But we have it in a sense at a cross purpose because the nodes are in different elements. So we have that north node in Aries, that fire, right? We have the south node in air with that Libra. So there's a sense of like, how do we navigate the conflicting properties within ourselves, right? How do we work with our own inhale energy, our own yin energy, and that exhale, that really fiery, passionate energy that also is contained within us, right? Represented by these nodes. So we have, again, this inward and this outward. Like, how do we work with that? Where do we need to go? Where are these interchanges needing to happen so that they can be reflected in the outer world around us? When we're talking about Pisces and Virgo, and I'll get into this in more detail, we're really talking also about well-being. We're talking about integration. I like to say the Pisces Virgo axis is as above, so below. It as within, so without. So before I move on, I want to talk about mutability a little bit. So we have in the Western tropical zodiac, which is the astrology that I practice, there's lots of different kinds of astrology. We're talking about a system that's based on the seasons. Okay. So we have seasons that are the beginning, right? The height of, and then the end, right? The transition to the next one. So when we look at the zodiac, it begins with Aries, right? In the spring, we have the start of spring. We have Taurus as the height of spring. And then Gemini is the end of spring, sort of that transition to summer, right? And it starts again when we're talking about Cancer. So Cancer is the beginning of summer. We have Leo at the height. We have Virgo at that transition period where it's the end of summer, right? We're going into the fall and the harvest. So those are the first 6 signs of the zodiac. We're talking about Virgo. We're talking about the harvest, what we reap, right? What did we begin in Aries? Pull it all the way around. And now that we're at the halfway point in the zodiac, the halfway point in the year, halfway point in our development, right? What have we harvested? Was it a good harvest or not a good harvest? So when we're talking about that with Virgo, we're also talking about Virgo making things whole, right? Virgo is the woman, or the symbol of the woman that is whole unto herself. So whether you're a man, whether you're a woman, or you identify other than that, this is about being whole and complete, right? Purifying the self, getting rid of the stuff that we don't need anymore, really buffering up, planning and planting. What do we want to do next? But being able to do that as a self-contained unit. I think that's really, really important to remember when we're talking about Virgo. And then again, it's that halfway point. Once we go past there and we're talking about Libra, we're talking about Scorpio and so on, we're talking about more relational kinds of signs. So it's about getting ourselves really, really solid, getting our, poop in a group, getting things together so that when we go out in the world, when we're relating with the world and the others around us, we can hopefully have our best intentions, our best self, our best boundaries, right? Because we're talking about an earth sign here as well. So that when we go out, we're better equipped to deal with the world around us and how we're able to interact with the people, the places, and the things that we meet. So we're really talking about well-being, talking about it on every level. And when we go back around, right? So we have Virgo, it's the 6th sign, it's that halfway point. We've got on the other half, of course, Pisces, which is the final sign, the 12th sign, and the end of the zodiac. So we have that theme, again, beginnings and endings, right? Closing things out, getting ready, making preparations so that we can change again, right? Once we hit Pisces, we start over again in Aries. And we can see that in our lives. There are things that, reach their midpoint, their high points, their low points, whatever it is. And then we move on from them and either do something else or do the same thing, but hopefully do it in a better way. Regardless, we're looking at these markers, right? That they're really, really important in terms of change, right? Pisces is the end of winter and the promise of spring again. So once we've gone all the way around the zodiac, we've really worked through all the lessons, all the trials, all the tribulations of the zodiac up until Pisces. Hopefully, we've gained some wisdom. Hopefully, maybe even we've become enlightened in some way, right? We've become connected again to things that are beyond just ourself, right? Aries is a little bit more self-focused, a lot more self-focused than Pisces. And there's a reason for that, right? We have to grow. If we think about like the human life cycle, yes, toddlers and infants are aware of people around them to a degree, but it's not until we really start maturing, right, that we start understanding that there's other people's feelings, there's other experiences, there's other viewpoints, there's all these other things out there. And that's when we really start to open up and become more a citizen, right, of the world around us, whether that's in a small sense, right, and our world is our community, or it's a country, or it's global, or whatever it is. So, taking all of that into consideration when we're looking at this full moon, is we're looking at context. What has reached a point where you need to harvest? What has reached a point where you hopefully by this time have some wisdom, so that when we go forward, right, when these nodes change signs, we can move forward with some more enlightenment. We can move forward and work on things in a more holistic and integrated way. So, when we're talking about Pisces, right, some of the Pisces symbolism here, let me clear some of this out. Some of the Pisces symbolism, right, dreams, visions, the metaphysical, things that are intangible, right? Whether you call it God or spirit or the universe, or you don't have a name for it, maybe it's, the field, doesn't matter, right? There is some animating force, benevolent force in the universe that helps weave everything together, right? So there's that Pisces, right, kind of energy. And then we have on the opposite side this Virgo, right? Embodiment. Okay. We're talking about earth. We're talking about things that are physical. We're talking about things that have been manifested. So we talk about above, below. Maybe we have this high ideal. We have this dream or this vision. How do we make it real? How do we make it happen? What's the plan? What are the details? How do we practice something over and over again until we get really good at it? Right? These are all the realm of Virgo, things that are high and lofty, and the meditation mat and all these kinds of things belong more in that Pisces land. When we talk about Virgo, we're talking about kind of the nuts and bolts of it. And both are so important, because if you only ever focus on taking something apart and critiquing it and analyzing it and improving on it, it loses magic, right? There's something very magical about the energy of Pisces, because it's bigger than life, right? It's bigger than just the mundane little details. But on the flip side of that, and maybe someone like this, or maybe this is you, people that they're so lost in the clouds, they're drifting around, they're just here and they're there, and they're yes to everybody and yes to everything, but they have no kind of grounding, right? Or they have no plan, or they're kind of not really able to maybe function efficiently on a day-to-day level. They're lacking some Virgo, right? So those are kind of some extreme comparisons here, but when we talk about this, it's talking again about how do we integrate ourselves? How do we bring our high ideals in and make them real? How do we have a connection to something that is beyond ourself, right? How do we understand or not that we are part of this larger fabric of humanity and the universe and whatever is beyond all of that, right? How does that get done in our day-to-day life? So we have this full moon sandwiched between Neptune in Pisces, which it also rules over in the modern tradition of astrology, and Saturn in Pisces. So again, talking about Saturn, right? The material plane, it's the edge of the visible planets, even though you can see Uranus from time to time. But it really marks like the boundary of what we can see. So Saturn has a lot to do with our physical existence and kind of the end of it as well. And we're talking about Neptune. the planet of, again, the metaphysical, illusions, glamour, things that are intangible, that are mystical, that we know are there, but maybe can't, we can't touch them. Like I can't just like poke it, right? But we know it's there, like our intuition, things of that nature. So we have this full moon sandwiched in between Saturn and Neptune, both in Pisces. Neptune comes around about every 165 years, right? So if we look back at the last time that Neptune was in Pisces and Saturn joined it, it was the Civil War era in the United States. The time before that, again, if we look at Neptune, go back another 165 plus years, talking about the early 1500s and about the Reformation period in England. So difficult time periods in history. A lot of things breaking down, breaking apart, feeling at odds, maybe draining on an energetic level, right? Or in a really real material level. When we look at this in context of what's happening now, I would say we can see the echoes of these things that have come before, right? We can really see that there's some big things going on in the world. And when all of this is going on, it can feel very draining. It can feel overwhelming. It can feel chaotic. It can feel like this moon, our emotional self, is just getting caught up in things that are so big and kind of beyond just our day-to-day life, although it affects our day-to-day life. So this is happening on a global level, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now, but we can see that. I would say we're affected by it, to at least some degree. This is also happening, I would say, on a micro level, a personal level. What in your life needs to be re-examined? What needs reformation, right? Saturn in Pisces. Saturn, it's like trying to build a sandcastle at the edge of where the ocean comes up, right? And keeps getting eroded away. How can we continue to pursue our goals and our visions, even if they're not working out the way that we thought they would? How can we be open to either changing paths or staying the path, even though we can't quite see what's coming up yet? How can we make big changes when we can't necessarily get a grasp on them? Right? Neptune makes things kind of dissolving. It's like fog. If you've ever lived a place where it gets foggy, you can't see maybe the structures in the background, but they're there. And we're in so many ways having to navigate through a fog right now. Again, there's a lot of crossroads energy. There's a lot that's coming up. One of the other things to look at here is what is breaking away? What is maybe crumbling down that you're holding on to that needs to change? Remember, we're talking about mutable signs here. We're talking about energy of change. The season is changing. So there's a season in all of our lives that is undergoing change. And wherever this lands in your own particular chart, we'll have more information for you, whether you feel it very intensely or, less intensely. Maybe it's just kind of happening out in the world. And that's okay too. What needs to be resolved? What needs to be walked away from? What maybe have you been planning on doing, or again, going back to wanting something to be solid, right? Because Saturn really likes things to be solid. It likes them to be crystallized and in form. Pisces, not so much, right? It kind of wants to just like have all the form. It's a little bit more of a chameleon shape here. What can you do with that? What potentially needs to be walked away from? What needs to be reformed? Or what do you need to find within yourself to tap into your own faith and surrender and trust that you can keep going? These are not easy questions. These are big questions in a lot of ways. So there's a couple of big squares here in the chart, and squares are energies that make 90-degree angles, okay, like the corner of a square. And what they do is they push up against one another, okay? So when they're pushing up against one another, they're asking for action. They're asking for integration and resolution. They're asking for some kind of adjustment to be made in order to go forward. And this is important. We need square energy. We can't just have everything trining and flowing all the time, although there is a big trine on here as well that I'll get to. So when we're talking about this full moon, right at 25 Pisces. It's also making an aspect, a squared aspect. It's weak, but it's there, to Jupiter, okay, at 20 degrees Gemini. So Jupiter moved over into Gemini in May of this year, bringing with it a lot in terms of Gemini kind of energy. So the challenge here can be realizing you don't have all the details. Okay. Because Jupiter is big, right? It's expansive. It's asking all the big questions. It's symbology. It's all these kinds of things. And it also happens to be one of the rulers of Pisces here. Gemini is more about like what's in front of you. What are the facts? What are the figures? What's happening right now? What's happening in your local sphere? Not necessarily like the big existential questions of like, what's the meaning of life? There's a lot going on here. Jupiter expands things. It brings a lot of stuff in. We can be getting a lot of information, too much information, maybe too many details, too much work, though that may be something that feels overwhelming. Or it could be that we're kind of so stuck in our beliefs about a certain subject or a certain person or what have you that we're not seeing beyond it, right? Because Jupiter can also get dogmatic. Jupiter rules both Pisces and Sagittarius, and that's one of the challenges with Jupiter is dogma of beliefs, right? My view is the only view. And that could also be a challenge, or maybe again, you're coming up against someone like this in your own life. So needing to take a look at that, needing to take a look at, are you willing to look at perhaps you don't have all the information, you don't have all the details, or perhaps there's another viewpoint that you haven't considered that's important. Okay, that's one possibility. On the flip side, it could be, what are you taking in? Right? Because Virgo and Pisces are also both very sensitive. I said at the beginning, they talk about your wellness, physical wellness, right? Metaphysical wellness, Virgo and Pisces there. What are you taking in? Because that's going to affect your well-being. Are you listening to all the doom and gloom scrolling and how everything is so, messed up? Not that it's not true, but, it's like if all you did was drink a Red Bull all day long, you never had water or anything, that's not good for your body. Like, yeah, you can do that for a while, but you're gonna have some problems down the line. So making sure that what you're intaking, the details, the facts, the figures, who you're talking to, who you're around, right? Gemini is very social. Are they good for you? So taking a look at that, because there is some kind of dynamic tension here that needs adjustment, that needs some examination. So that's something that could come up during this eclipse period. The second square I want to take a look at, and it's the big red line here, again, is between, we're talking about, the nodes. Okay, so the nodes of the moon, the south node at 6, right? North node at 6. And then Mars in Cancer at 7 degrees of Cancer. So when we have a square between the nodes of the moon and a planet, it's like a big flashing neon sign that says like, pay attention to me. Okay, this is a very important piece where we can have the capacity to make a giant quantum leap forward. We can really do some huge personal growths if we can navigate and integrate skillfully the lessons that the planet that's squaring the nodes is trying to bring to us. So if you have anything in the cardinal signs, there's nothing really, well, there's one planet that's fixed on here, but really this whole chart is cardinal, which is starting stuff, facing confrontations, and mutable, which is change. So, it's not a peaceful, like just steady energy chart by any stretch of the imagination, because the lone fixed planet here is Uranus. So he's anything but stable. We're talking about this square. Okay. The nodes, right, talk about personal development. They also have a quality of fatedness to them. Okay. But I'm going to stick with more like the development here. So when we're talking about this, we're talking about Mars. Okay. We're talking about needing action. Mars needs action. It needs something to do, right? Hopefully something productive. And we're talking about squares. We're talking about action. We're talking about needing to do something. Okay. So when we look at this, again, we want to do something. This is an action item that needs to happen, because when we ignore the lessons of the nodes, whatever that neon flashing sign happens to be in our particular life, not only do we miss out on integrating the lesson, but it doesn't just go away. It'll keep coming back. It's going to be like that record that's skipping, right? For those of you that don't get that reference, right? It's something that just keeps going over and over on a loop. Like if you watch the same, I guess, like TikTok reel and it doesn't move on, right? It's just looping, looping, looping. And that's going to be really uncomfortable, right? Going forward. So the better you can pay attention here and the better you can take action on whatever comes up, yes, we want to do that. So we're talking about Cancer. Cancer is affiliated with the moon, right? The moon is the natural ruler of Cancer. We're talking about many things here. There's always a spectrum of possibility when we're talking about any planet or sign or house. But for Cancer, this is possibly to do in a literal sense with family matters in some way. It could be to do with protection. It could be to do with nurturing. Okay, Cancer is very nurturing because it wants to protect things, right? If you have something that's a newborn or a baby, or it's a puppy or a, you know, a little project that you're trying to get off the ground, you want to protect it. You don't want outside predators coming in and poking it and messing with it. And, you know, you're like, no, get out, right? So that's why Cancer has that encircling kind of energy, that protective energy, sometimes called the parental energy, whether you're from the school of astrology that says it's the mother or the father. To me, it's really just that overarching, like protective quality of there's something here that's vulnerable, and it's really important that we keep it safe and keep things from messing with it. So we have that kind of energy going on here. And again, when we're talking about the moon, we're talking about Cancer, one of the things that I think is really pertinent here is memory. There's something in the memory, Pisces, right? Moon, the collective memory, or perhaps in our family history, or perhaps in our own personal history that needs to be integrated so that it can be let go, so that you can take the giant leap forward and really take that leap forward in development. Okay, the eclipses can do that. They can really help us just kind of fast track, which is awesome. I love that. I'm all about that. So when we're talking about Cancer, this may not be something that's direct, right? It could be something that's indirect. It could be something that seems like it's kind of like walking in from the side view. Okay, so be on the lookout for that. And again, there is some kind of challenge, some kind of confrontation that needs to happen because we're talking about a cardinal sign. So talking about Mars. Mars is the warrior. Okay, it's the warrior archetype within us all. It is the planet that takes action, right? It's what gets us up and drives us. It helps to motivate us, right? It gets us passionate. It's about what we will fight for, or also what we will defend. Okay, Mars doesn't necessarily have to just go out and whack people down. It can also be in a defense posture again, which even though Mars is not necessarily the most comfortable in Cancer, I think does in some ways actually work well with Cancer, or at least has the potential to. The potential for it to not work well is also pretty big, because if we're talking about kind of the shadow side of Cancer, can be with Mars this kind of irritation, this taking everything personally and offensively, getting very easily emotionally aroused towards particularly anger or sulking or passive aggressiveness or things of that kind of nature that kind of hopefully want to, again, if they come up, look at, be curious about, because there is some kind of message for you. Like if something is irritating you and triggering and you find yourself having an emotional outburst, take a look. What is that thing? What is it trying to tell you that you need to take a look at? Right. And maybe it's someone else and you're the recipient of it. And, you know, there could be a lesson in there too. Like, did I provoke them? You know, because oftentimes we think perhaps that we are not at not at fault for anything, which could be true or not, but sometimes, we do have a role to play that needs examining. So looking at that, right, this is a really wonderful invitation to look at our emotional state, what's coming up for us. We're talking about water, we're talking about emotions, we're talking about the feeling realms. We're also talking about intuition. We're talking about the psychic phenomenons of, the clairs, like the clairaudience, the claircognizance, the clairsentience, those kinds of things. Again, those metaphysical, beyond just what we can tangibly touch kinds of things. And with the moon being in Pisces, right next to Neptune, I'd wager there's the opportunity for a lot of downloads to come in. Okay. However, you work with that, whether that's through meditation, whether that's going swimming, whether that's listening to music, however you're channeling that kind of energy is really, really, I think, going to be quite pronounced, not just during the eclipse and the few days before and after, but really over the next couple of years. Because remember, eclipses are like big full moons. They last for a long time, usually a couple of years. And since we're also talking about, kind of previewing the nodal change, I definitely think this energy is going to, in some way, inform us for the next couple of years or be thematic for the next couple of years. The last thing that I really want to focus on here is this grand Earth trine between the sun in Virgo, talking about Pluto in Capricorn retrograde, and Uranus retrograde in Taurus. So that's that big blue triangle you see in the middle here. Now, there is something called a kite on here for those of you that are familiar and hoping that I'll talk a lot about it. Aspect patterns of this nature really aren't my specialty, so I don't have anything to add that's especially profound, but I did want to point it out that there is this grand trine here. And the release point is actually the moon, which I think is really interesting. Again, that call to inner action, needing to integrate something from all of this earth energy. But again, that's not my specialty. So I'm going to go back to the grand trine. So talking about the grand trine, this big blue triangle in here, I think is really important with these earth elements because of a few different things. One, we have this flow. So we have this flow of energy between all three of the earth signs, right? Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn. We have the two planets that are a part of this grand trine because the sun is not a planet, it's a luminary, right? It's a star. But both of the planets here that are involved in this grand trine are in retrograde, and they're both outer planets. They've been there for a while. And I think there's a lot that we need to look at here with the sun shining light out. Okay. So wherever the sun goes, it illuminates, right? It makes brighter. It's like a call for us to pay attention. And when it's contacting not only the moon here, but also Pluto and Uranus, I think we have to pay attention. So when we're looking at this, we're talking about earth, we're talking about patience, we're talking about groundedness, we're talking about what's material, okay, what's materialized, our physical body, right? Everything that's physically incarnated. We're talking about our resources as well, right? This could be money, this could be land, this could be food, this could be a number of things. We're talking also about what makes the world beautiful, right? What do we do with the resources that are around us? How do we utilize them? Are we utilizing them well or not utilizing them well? And when we're talking about Earth, we're also talking about these signs are the doers of the zodiac. They get the stuff done, right? They take their resources, they make a plan, they make something great out of it. Okay. So when we look at this full moon asking us, what are our physical needs? How are we doing that? Okay, what does that look like? This is a great time. Even though those planets are in retrograde, it's actually, I think, a better, in some senses, that they are retrograde, because retrogrades, we get a second chance. We get to do things over, right? And I can hear some of you like, oh my gosh, I'm so sick of Pluto and Capricorn, like just go away already. I'm so sick of Uranus and Taurus, like bye, can you please just move? Well, they both will next year. And that is significant in itself. All three of the outer planets are moving into new signs and new element sexture, which is a huge, huge shift. So we're on like the last chance express here. Okay. So when we talk about Uranus, talk about this one down here first. Uranus has been in Taurus since 2018, like shaking up the Taurus parts of our chart, shaking up, how we look at what's valuable to us. Where do we want to put our resources, including ourselves, right? We are our own greatest resource, always, all the time. Where do we want to put our blood, sweat, and tears? Where do we want to put our expertise and our love and our care and our attention? What has changed over the last, 6-ish years, but in particular also the last 4 years, right? What's changed? What do you find valuable now? What do you need now? Right. And again, this could have something to do with food or actioning. We look at how many people now have their own backyard gardens, right? 8 years ago, that was weird, right? Only a few like outliers had things like that. Now it's almost commonplace, which to me is really beautiful. We look at, how our monies have been shaken up. For some people, it's been a really fortuitous time because Uranus also has to do with the wheel of fortune, right? Turning and returning. For some people, they're on a downturn. So that might be challenging. How have you figured out ways to be resourceful with whatever you have? Okay. With Taurus, it can be easy sometimes to take things for granted. That's actually a shadow side of Taurus is materialism. It's not its highest expression. Taurus's highest expression is, if we're talking about resources, is making the most out of what you have to build it to its height, because remember, it's a fixed sign, it's the height, and then also be able to provide for yourself and those that are near and dear to you, right? Whatever that means, whatever scale that is for you. So that's really important. And Uranus shaken stuff up. It has not been an easy time for people who have a lot of planets in Taurus. This could have been, maybe a relatively uneventful time for you if you don't have a lot of stuff going on in the fixed signs and Taurus in particular. But we have, again, this opportunity to look back and see, well, what has Uranus been liberating us from? So Uranus is a planet of freedom and liberation from the known, what we have known, what has grown stale and stagnant and is no longer contributing to our growth. Okay, that might be things that are welcome, that might be things that are unwelcome. And that's the hard part about Uranus is sometimes it's the things that are unwelcomed because we are not paying attention. But if Uranus, if you think about it, it's like being in a pressure cooker. We need to release steam. So if you don't release the pressure of Uranus, that's when Uranus gets really funky and nasty in your life, is because it's trying to let off steam. And sometimes it just has to let off pressure, right? I live in California. There's earthquakes here. Sometimes the earth just needs to move and release some pressure and we get earthquakes, right? Wanted or unwanted. What needs to change? What are you resisting, right? Or how can you integrate these changes? Where can you spotlight, you know what? Yeah, I have gotten more resourceful. I'm so grateful I have the garden in my backyard. Maybe my bank account doesn't look like I want it to, but I feel wealthy in all these other ways. I discovered I'm really good at this. I discovered that it's actually not valuable to me to work a corporate job and smile on the outside while I'm screaming on the inside. And I really want to, do this other thing. Whatever that is for you, take a look at that, shine a light on it, be grateful for it, and then look at how you can use that energy going forward. I didn't do a video on Jupiter and Uranus and Taurus. I did a talk with another astrologer, which I'll have to link below, Ralph McIntyre. I didn't do my own video, which I'm now wishing that I had, but oh well, this year has been bizarre. But anyhow, we had Jupiter and Uranus conjunct, which set off a 14-year cycle for the collective, for all of us to focus on building, creating something new. The last time it happened, it was at the beginning of Aries, end of Pisces. It kind of did a little retrograde back and forth there. And that was about 2010. And in my view, what popped off there was the rise of the, kind of this entrepreneurial ship, the social media, especially with with Pisces here, this glamorization, things that are kind of illusory. I know some of Uranus is really kind of put on certain things, but I would say it does fit really well with astrology, with the internet, things of that nature. We saw this explosion of things like YouTube. Film has to do with Pisces. So we're watching, like you're watching me on film right now, right? I go on YouTube and watch other astrologers. That was something big that popped off around 2010. Here we are, May of 2024, when Jupiter was next to Uranus. We're talking about Taurus. We're talking about making things tangible now. It's, I think, in some ways, moving away from so much of maybe the digital sphere. I could be wrong, but I think we need to do more things that are tangible as well. Do things that are of value also. It's like, I mean, your time on this earth is precious, right? Do you really want to sit down and listen to someone who's, I don't know, just making someone else eat a bunch of really hot chips or something? Like, I don't know. That's not how I want to spend my time. That's not valuable to me. So things of that nature, making things valuable. What do you have to share? What do you have that's tangible that you can do something with? What are you grateful for? Right? Take a look at that, because Virgo can really help make a plan here, make a plan to go forward and to enhance these kinds of things for the next 14 years. So beautiful there. Pluto in Capricorn. So, woo, it's been wild, has it not? So Pluto in Capricorn, retrograde, 29 degrees. 29 is that really, really critical degree. It's that last chance express where it's like, hey, train's going to leave. And once Pluto moves into Aquarius in November of this year, this is its last run. It's your last chance for review. It's your last chance to tie things up in the Capricorn area of your chart. Whatever you want Pluto to, whatever gold, whatever transformation or a phoenix moment you want Pluto to bring you, you better do it now, because he's leaving and he's gone and he won't be back in our lifetime, right? It'll be another 248 years before he comes back around to Capricorn. And I don't think any of us will be here at that point, but who knows? So when we're talking about Capricorn, we're talking about reviewing this, we're talking about what has been going on since 2008, right? That's when Capricorn, Pluto went into Capricorn, 2008. What have you learned? How have you grown or regressed, right? We can definitely see regression out there in the world. Not everybody matured by a long stretch of the imagination. We have a lot of big babies out there crying and throwing tantrums about not getting their way of things, right? Blaming everyone else. That's such a low expression of Capricorn. So when we look at this, how have you become the author of your life, right? If you're familiar with your chart, what area of your life have you become more of an authority on? Have you stood up and said, you know what? No, I can be in charge of this part of my life. I can still listen to other people, right? Maybe you've become a mentor. Maybe you've become a leader or in charge in some way. How has that happened for you, right? Or perhaps are you still, again, giving your power away to something outside yourself, whether it's a boss or a family member or the government or whatever it is, right? How are you self-authoring? How have you matured? How have you grown? How have you faced the challenges and continued to rise, right, up to the top? Because we're talking about the goat, right? Capricorn's the goat. So the question here, of course, is there some place in your life where you might still be scapegoating? Because, come on, we all do it. Right? We all have moments where we blame something else for a problem that really has to do with us, right? Like, is that something that's happening for you? Or maybe it's people around you. Or can you be the GOAT, right? The GOAT, the greatest of all time in your own life? Can you do that for yourself in your own life, right? Be the GOAT. Do that. It's a good option. So very, 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 very lastly, we're talking about Venus. She is in square to Pluto here. And as the ruler of the South Node, there could be some power struggles here in your relational life. It's possible in your finances or something that you're trying to negotiate, some kind of contract situation or something of that sort. Maybe it's been going on for a long time, could be coming to a head. Either way, there's something here that kind of has to give. Remember, when we're talking about Pluto, we're talking about something that has to go. Okay. So, Pluto, we may have had to let go of things. I'm sure we had to let go of things in our life so that something new could be born in its place. So, let Virgo show you where that is, right? Focus. What have you learned on a physical, material level about becoming the authority of your own life, being your own personal goat, letting yourself be liberated from the stuff that's no longer serving you and being able to emotionally integrate that, right? Let yourself have the feels about it, whether they're positive, they're joyful, they're amazing. Maybe you feel kind of crushed or overwhelmed. Let yourself have that. Let it be part of who you are so that you can move forward in a stronger, more integrated, more whole, more peaceful, hopefully, you, right? Because we are talking about, again, that as above, so below, as within, so without, talking about your wellness, right? This eclipse can really be a turning point in your life for the positive. I really hope that it is, or it can be more of a challenge. That's life. Sometimes things are difficult, sometimes they're joyful, and everything in between. So, all right. So, thanks for watching. I hope I've earned your subscription. And if I have, thank you so, so much for subscribing. If you want to know more about your personal chart, how these energies might be affecting you, what planetary season you happen to be in, you're always welcome to book a reading with me. Either way, I hope this eclipse is beautiful for you and brings you lots of joy and quantum leaps forward. Until next time, thanks so much. Mwah. Take care.